Channel News.
Hello and thanks for joining us. I'm Lena Tillett. In the race for president and governor in North Carolina, no big surprises on Super Tuesday. It'll be deja vu at the top of the ticket come November with the Joe Biden-Donald Trump rematch.
My lifetime has taught me to embrace freedom and democracy, a future based on core values that have defined America: honesty, decency, dignity, equality, to respect everyone, to give everyone a fair shot, to give hate no safe harbor.
All of the problems that you have today, I don't think you would have had any of them. You'd only have success, and that's what's ultimately going to unify this country and unify this party. We have a great Republican Party with tremendous talent, and we want to have unity, and we're going to have unity, and it's going to happen very quickly.
Attorney General Josh Stein and Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson each had commanding wins, setting the stage for that competitive and nationally watched race. Down ballot, state lawmakers and political observers are still wrapping their minds around some upsets in unexpected races. In the race for state superintendent of public instruction, a candidate with no experience inside public schools, Michelle Morrow, beat the Republican incumbent, Catherine Truitt. And a number of incumbents in the state legislature lost their jobs as well on Tuesday. Tonight, our panel will explore why and the new patterns we're seeing among North Carolina voters. Bob Orr is a Republican and former state Supreme Court justice. Robert Reeves II represents District 54 in the state House of Representatives. He's a Democrat. And Thomas Mills is the founder of Politics NC and a former political consultant. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. I'm starting with a bit of breaking news this Friday, something we don't always do here on the record. We are learning that the chairman of the Republican Party for North Carolina, Michael Whatley, has been selected to lead the Republican National Committee. I want to share the lead from the Washington Post on Friday. It says, quote, "The Republican National Committee voted Friday to install Donald Trump's hand-picked leadership team, completing his takeover of the National Party." We should note his daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, will serve as co-chair. So, Judge Orr, your reaction to Michael Whatley now leading the National Party?
Well, I'm not surprised. There's been a lot of speculation that he was Trump's pick for that position, along with the daughter-in-law, Laura Trump. So I think in some respects it may bode well for North Carolina that a national chairman is from this state, and actually, I guess Laura Trump's from this state also. I do think it presents some challenges for the state party with him gone. I'm not sure who will replace him or how effectively they might be.
Mr. Mills, what do you think it says about the strength of the Republican Party in North Carolina that now the person who led this party is leading the National Party?
You know, I don't think you can look at the strength of the Republican Party based on what just happened with Mr. Whatley. What I don't understand is why would a guy take on a job where he's going to go get humiliated by the president and end up being demeaned? I mean, it just baffles me why you would line up to have yourself made fun of by a guy like Donald Trump. But that's, hey, whatever suits floats his boat.
Judge Orr, I hear you laughing. How do you respond to that?
Well, it is a national position, and it's not illogical for Whatley, particularly if former President Trump wanted him to be the chair. I think his independence in that position is going to be constantly challenged, whether it's from the Congress, from President Trump, or from Laura Trump. And so, to Thomas's point, one wonders, why you'd want to give up the independence of being the state chair in North Carolina to be just another figure in D.C.
Well, he did deliver North Carolina to Donald Trump twice, and obviously they've been very successful in General Assembly wins. While we're talking about the presidential race, Representative Reeves, we saw a very impassioned President Biden and the State of the Union address. I wanted to play just a clip of how he sounded when he spoke specifically about his age.
When you get to be my age, certain things become clearer than ever. I know the American story. Again and again, I've seen the contest between competing forces in the battle for the soul of our nation. between those who want to pull America back to the past and those who want to move America into the future.
Representative Reeves, the right message?
No, I think it's completely the right message in what we're looking at right now. I mean, immediately after Tuesday, the first message that we hear from the Republican nominee for governor is that we need to go back to a time when women couldn't vote. And, you know, I didn't want to be the one to break it to him that women got to vote before some of us got to vote, so it might compromise his ability to run for governor. But with that being said, I think that President Biden is giving the exact message that needs to be heard, that this has been replayed throughout history. And this is an old story, and there's only one way that it ends in a good fashion.
You know, I've seen pretty objectively that people described President Biden's delivery as fiery. Did you think that that was a good style for the president?
Absolutely, absolutely. We're at a stage right now where that's what people want to see. They associate age with, you know, slowing down and not being impassioned and things of that sort. And I think what he's showing is what actually does happen the older that you get. You become a lot more impassioned about issues. You become a lot more understanding. You become a lot more knowledgeable. And I think that sometimes with us, we need to see that more than understanding that it's there. And I thought he did a great job of showing that.
Mr. Mills, turnout was very low in the primary, 24% among registered voters. So I don't know how much we can extrapolate from what happened to what may happen in November. But let's talk about what did happen. What were the biggest takeaways for you in terms of how voters turned out for Biden and Trump?
Well, you can't really compare the two, the turnout in the two parties, because the Republicans basically had general elections for a whole bunch of gerrymandered districts. They took a bunch of congressional districts. You know, we've been relatively evenly split, and they gave them to the Republicans. And so you had a whole bunch of really crowded primaries where the winner's going to end up going to Congress. So they turned out high. They also had competitive primaries in a number of council of state races. And Democrats largely avoided really contested primaries. So there wasn't as much energy about going to the polls. And still, even though she doesn't have a lot of momentum, Nikki Haley was on that ballot. And so there was a primary for president, there was a primary, the one for governor clearly Robinson ran away with it, but the people running against him were real people. I mean, state treasurer's no minor job. So there were some real races on the Republican side. There weren't on the Democratic side. I don't think there's any correlation to the turnout in the primary as opposed to the general election.
Judge Rohr, what do you think that former President Trump has to do to get Nikki Haley supporters on board?
Well, I think that's the key. There were approximately 250,000 either registered Republicans or unaffiliated voters who chose a Republican primary ballot that voted for Nikki Haley, and about another 50,000 that voted for other candidates. And my impression is that former President Trump, Lieutenant Governor Robinson, and the Republican Party have really pretty well stiff-armed the Haley voters and have not been particularly welcoming. But if they're going to win, they don't have any other choice but to figure out how to bring the vast majority of Haley voters back into the Republican fold in November.
Yeah, Trump said that he believes that just success in winning will ultimately unify the party.
I don't think it's that easy. And it's not just the registered Republicans and registered Democrats. As we know, the unaffiliated voter in North Carolina is the largest contingency in the state, almost a third of the voters. And this turnout was probably half of what the general election is going to be. So the question is, for former President Trump in particular, but also the Biden campaign, how do you attract those unaffiliated voters into voting for you and arguably voting down ballot for people in your party?
Let's talk about a Council of State race that shocked a lot of folks. The Superintendent of Public Instruction, Michelle Morrow, a homeschool mom, no experience in public schools. In fact, she called them indoctrination centers, has won. And before this, her only run for public office was a failed run for the Wake County School Board. Our NC Capitol team has learned that Morrow seemed to out-campaign Catherine Truitt, that she went to a number of events, she traveled the state. What was your reaction to that upset, Representative Reeves?
I mean, candidly, for me, it was consistent with what I've been seeing for the last several years in the General Assembly. I mean, there is a complete disdain for public school. And if there is a complete disdain for public school, then it only makes sense to get somebody in office that has a complete disdain for public school. I mean, I think there's just been it's past a war on public education. It is a full-on, this needs to go. And we could get into all the reasons why and things of that sort, but if you don't believe in the institution, then why would you really care about who it is that's running it?
Judge Orr, do you think that Michelle Morrow's passion, obviously she has a lot of passion, she was able to get people out to vote for her, is going to be able to translate in November? She has focused on, culture wars, but again, she also seems to be an aggressive campaigner.
In a lot of ways, this may be the most fascinating race in the state, in that, to answer your question, she is going to have to figure out a way to reach out to the vast majority of North Carolinians who either have children or grandchildren or went to the public schools. And even though there are challenges in the public schools, I don't think the people of this state want to see the system privatized. And so her rhetoric, her passion will help to a certain extent, but I think she has to figure out a message that appeals to a far broader cut of North Carolina voters than what got her elected in the primary.
I wanted to talk with you, Mr. Mills, about a number of other notable incumbent losses. They just don't all seem to tell the same story, though. So we have a full screen. 10-term Republican Representative George Cleveland lost to a college student, and he's conservative. Democratic Senator Mike Woodard lost to a more progressive candidate, an Obama administration alum, and Democratic Representative Michael Ray appears to have lost his race. There could be a recount here, and he didn't always vote the party way. So what do you make of that array of losses?
You've got to separate out what happened on the Democratic side and on the Republican side. I think what happened in that the superintendent's race is almost endemic of the whole Republican Party right now, and it really started with Mark Robinson. They keep electing people with no experience, and I mean none, and they put them in positions of authority. It's going to be a disaster. So far they've lost. I mean, or they haven't gotten too far. But Robinson's got no experience at all. He's never done anything except serve as lieutenant governor. And his biggest accomplishment to date is making a viral video out of a rant about gun rights on the Greensboro City Council. So you've got this woman who her whole thing is ranting about public schools. George Cleveland lost to a 21-year-old activist. The lieutenant governor's race, we had like 2 or 3 Republican legislators. All of them lost. You had John Hardister over in was that Labor? He lost. Yeah. Mm-hmm. None of the elected officials who tried to move up won. They all lost in primaries, in race after race after race. And it's a theme. These people don't want to govern. They want to burn it down. And I think they're making a big mistake, because I think most people in North Carolina want to have folks who understand how government works. I mean, Mark Robinson's got no experience, and you're going to ask this guy to go oversee a $30 billion budget? You wouldn't hire him to run Bank of America. You wouldn't hire him to go run Pfizer. And yet we're going to let him run the state of North Carolina? I don't think so. And I think that's the theme. The Democrats, let me just real quick, those were, what happened with Michael Ray, they were targeted by some groups because of voting to sustain the budget. Mike Woodard, that was maybe a little bit more surprising, but Woodard has tried to run other races for a while, floated his name, and I think there was a sense that maybe this guy doesn't want this job anymore.
He did just run for mayor in Durham.
He just ran for mayor.
That's a fair point. So, Judge Orr, I did want to allow you to respond to that concept of burning it all down.
Sorry.
Well, it was very interesting. Former Governor Jim Martin, who was our governor from '84 through '88, was he ran on better roads, better jobs, better schools. He was the Republican governor for 8 years. That doesn't seem to be the mantra. This is performance politics. It's not about issues. And so this boisterous, loud, aggressive, anti-government message has worked for Donald Trump. And I think what we're seeing across the country within the Republican Party is that people are trying to emulate that I'm against everything and the institutions are bad, including institutions within your own political party. And you look at the top of the Republican ticket in this state with Mark Robinson, Dan Bishop running for lieutenant governor, for attorney general, and then you've got Ms. Mora running for superintendent of public instructions. All are going to be ramped up and overly aggressive in their messaging.
Okay, we want to talk about the matchup between Josh Stein and Mark Robinson in more detail. Stay with us. Well, as expected, Josh Stein will face Mark Robinson in the race for governor. Now comes 8 months of intense campaigning on a race some believe will be the most expensive in the state's history and one of the most watched around the country. Let's listen to a bit of their message after they won.
But we must be clear-eyed about the stakes of this election. We're at a crossroads, and the choice before us, two competing visions for North Carolina. Mark Robinson's vision is bleak and divisive, consumed by spite and hate. He spends time pitting people against each other.
Running in this general election, we're not going to allow these folks to drag this campaign into the mud. Those who want to go into the mud, feel free. Where we're going is we're going towards the substantive issues that all North Carolinians face. The things that will make North Carolina great, that will take her to her next level of success.
Representative Reeves, I wonder if you think that's the right message for Stein to continue to draw that contrast with Robinson.
Well, I think he has to. And I think what the problem is that the electorate, when you're in the political bubble, you're thinking that everybody knows everything that's been said and all these comments and things of that sort, but they don't. When they get a chance to see somebody out on the campaign trail, they, sometimes they're not hearing some of the things that they seem to really feel. For instance, one of the things that, has been a hot issue obviously this year is discussion about reproductive rights. Robinson's been very clear about what his position is, but when you hear him talk in certain settings, he refuses to even bring it up. But he has said, we're going to put in a full ban, which of course, as you've seen in Alabama, now will stretch to IVF and all these things. So that is why sometimes candidates are put in a position where they've got to draw the contrast so that people understand, no, this isn't two people arguing over policy. These are two people who are actually battling for the soul of the state.
Judge Orr, I thought it was interesting. I watched Robinson's full speech. He only spoke for about 10 minutes, and he talked about Stein. I mean, he mentioned his name maybe once. He really didn't talk about him a lot, and he didn't really seem like he wanted to present the contrast. What do you think it'll take for him to get voters on his side?
I would almost say a 180. I think one of the most amazing things I saw post-primary was the North Carolina Chamber talking about the results of the primary could be devastating to business in North Carolina. And they weren't pointing their finger at Josh Stein. They were quietly pointing it at Mark Robinson and several other candidates. And so I think Mark Robinson is geared to worry about and campaign on social issues, on guns, on right to life, on vouchers, on wokeness, all of these kind of hot button social issues. Stein, I think, would prefer to talk about the substantive issues, but I suspect after a few months, Stein won't have to draw comparisons with Mark Robinson. Mark Robinson will have set the record set.
We only have about 20 seconds, Mr. Mills. What do you think this race is going to come down to?
Well, I think it's going to come down to that vision. I mean, Josh Stein really wants to make the state a better place. He's got a track record, and Mark Robinson's got none. The only thing he's going to be able to do is talk about what he wants to tear down, what he wants to blow up. And I don't think that people in North Carolina really want to have somebody running the state who wants to tear it down.
We should say Mark Robinson does at least have the record of winning. He won his last race.
One race.
All right. Thank you, Representative Reeves, Judge Orr, and Mr. Mills, so much for your time. We will be right back after this. Welcome back. Our brand new WRAL documentary, Unsafe, North Carolina Kids Dying from Gun Violence, premieres next Wednesday on WRAL and WRALdoc.com. WRAL's investigative documentary reporter Kristen Severance looks at why guns are the leading cause of death for young people in North Carolina and explores a solution that could save lives. Here's a short clip.
Right now at 6, a 6-month-old baby is at the UNC Medical Center after being shot.
A 9-year-old girl is in the hospital after being shot.
An 8-year-old girl is fighting for her life. A 3-year-old boy accidentally shot and killed himself last night.
We are continuing to stay on top of a heartbreaking story out of Cumberland County where a 5-month-old has died.
After a 10-year-old boy accidentally shot his 1-year-old cousin.
Guns kill more kids in the U.S. than any other cause.
More than cancer, and now more than motor vehicle crashes.
Kids in North Carolina are 51% more likely to die from guns compared to other states.
I take bullets out of children, sometimes day after day after day.
And she's not gonna be in that room when I go check on her. And it's hard. It's hard to accept.
All of them could have been prevented. That's the thing. All of them could have been prevented.
Something we've been covering frequently here at WRAL, guns.
For some, these tragic stories are so common, they almost blur together. And the fight for guns is so loud,
the nation against gun violence.
It drowns out meaningful change.
I just wish we could take politics out of it.
So how often are you bringing this issue up with your patients?
I'm WRAL investigative documentary reporter Kristen Severance.
You know, with us grieving,
I talk to families impacted by gun violence and experts across the state. They say there's a clear way to save kids, a solution with bipartisan support.
First, unsecure firearms. That is a huge problem that we have.
Kids know where parents keep their guns, even if parents think they don't.
I mean, I'll just ask the question, are you trying to take people's guns away?
I do not want to take people's guns away. I want them to keep the guns that they have more safely secured.
I am not anti-gun by far. However, if this gun is where it should be at, secured in a safe, we're not sitting here today.
And you can watch our full documentary, Unsafe, North Carolina Kids Dying from Gun Violence, Wednesday at 7:30 on WRAL or WRAL.com. Thanks so much for joining us. If you'd like to comment about tonight's discussion, find us on social media. Have a good night.